Powered by Sports Interaction, Canada Sportsbook.
It's March Mania at Sports Interaction. NHL, NBA, March Madness, MLB, and so much more. It's bananas. Play Pinata Picks and Minute Madness, exclusive games with insane odds you can't play anywhere else. Make your next bet with Sports Interaction. Download the app in Ontario using the QR code on your screen, or head to sportsinteraction.com/SDPN to get started. 19 plus, please play responsibly. Well, that was a fun one. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Game Over Ottawa. It's me, Charlie, your best friend, doing this one solo. No guest, no mod. Mod was at the game, and I am not at all jealous of her. So apologize right off the top for the inevitable amount of sneezing. I'm sick. Getting over a cold, nearly over it, but I just feel like, guarantee of a few coughs, some sniffles, some sneezing. Even though the show is remote and through Zoom, I thought, can't take any chances. Don't bring on any guests. Don't want to get anybody sick. Big win for the Sens tonight, against another team who's maybe playing below expectations, maybe, a bit more so than Ottawa. But we'll take a win where we can get a win as fans of this team. So, before we get into the game itself, I think we got to talk about something I think arguably bigger than the game. Gary Bettman was in town today. Gary Bettman was in Ottawa at the game. He did a bit of a media availability, mostly just about the future change in ownership with the team. So today, in his media availability before the game, he said that the process of new ownership taking over will be completed mid-summer. Now, that is later than a lot of us were hoping. So it's not going to happen until after the draft, until the extremely important re-signing period for guys like DeBrincat and Brandstrom and Pinto. And it's going to happen after the meatiest part of the offseason is done. If we're talking midsummer, maybe Gary has a different definition of midsummer, but to me, that's you're well into July. You're probably mid-July, if not late July. So, I think there's good and bad there. I think the bad news is you don't have the knowledge of, you don't have the comfort of knowing there's stable ownership behind any other big moves that the team wants to make in the offseason. The upside to that is, we have talked about this quite a bit on the show, weighing the pros and cons of new ownership comes in. Do they want to clean house as far as management and just the general staff goes? So, if it is ownership that's going to want to start fresh and just kind of let everyone go, which, I think for a team, regardless of resumes and regardless of how well management has done over the last 12 or so months, I think if you're ownership and you're looking at it really coldly and you go, okay, well, this team hasn't made the playoffs since 2017, it's time to clean house, don't care how close they were this past season, it's possible. So the fact that ownership will be coming in, probably, I'm going to just give Gary the benefit of the doubt that he's right. If that is the case, then, it guarantees Dorian an opportunity to have another hot Pierre summer. If new ownership doesn't come in until after the draft, re-signing, free agency, all that stuff, it means that Pierre's got, he doesn't have to worry about whether or not he's going to have a job come the off season. And he's going to be able to be very hands-on and, to take the next step with his team himself, which he's probably, I don't know how likely he thinks it is he would be canned anyway. I think I'm with most people when I say that I'd love to keep him on, and it's amazing to see what he's been able to accomplish with ownership, letting him do what he wants. So I just wanted to start the show off, um, just start with that right off the top, the fact that Gary was in Ottawa, and it's probably not gonna, ownership itself, documents and all that stuff, it won't be done until well into the off season. So important to note. um let's talk about this game against the Florida Panthers, uh divisional rival, and yeah, starting this season, brotherly rival, family, I don't know. The Kachuk brothers playing each other, I believe they said it was a 17th time, which sounds like a lot because up until this season they're in different conferences, but the key thing to remember there is the COVID season with the Canadian division, where I think they played each other 9 times when Matthew Kachuk was on Calgary. So and I can't remember. I feel bad. I can't remember who said this on the broadcast, but I believe up until tonight it was 8 wins apiece. So Brady is now ahead at 9 wins to 8. So the first period they looked pretty solid all around. I have no real complaints with the first period. It was a little back and forth maybe, but you know. Hard to complain. Shabbat with an incredible move, on the point, finds Brady, puts in. Brady Kachuk has 34 goals, by the way, folks. I like. Okay, so um, that's worth talking about. I think that Brady Kachuk has 34 goals. Kachuk is gonna. Even myself, someone who has I won't say always. I was one of those people who was like, I don't know about Brady Kachuk that early on. I'm kind of roasting myself here on the show. As soon as I saw what Brady was capable of, I've been a big Brady fan, obviously. And yeah, I think the dude is destined to have multiple 40-goal seasons, given how this is going. And then Eric Brandstrom with his second goal in 3 games, unassisted, by the way, on the power play. Eric Brandstrom is something else, and you can tell that coast to coast, I can't speak, that coast to coast goal he scored the other day really boosting his confidence. He is flying out there. Couple of really nice chances for him. He is finally really starting to carry the puck himself through the neutral zone, out of the defensive end. He's looking great. So the first period, Sens finished that first period with a 2-0 lead. I got no complaints, really. And then in the second period, the Sens, I'm gonna be a little negative. So Sogard kind of bailed the team out on a few really rough turnovers in their own end. The nice thing about having a goalie who's like 7'3", he's not actually 7'3", is that he made a few great saves, just laying out and just stretching his tippy toes and just praying that the puck hits him. So that works. So yeah, all that to say, a couple rough spots there in the second period, but overall, by some miracle, they don't lose the lead, and eventually they recover. Batherson with a really nice no look pass to DeBrincat, who scores on a gorgeous one timer with the shot straighter than the Stahl brothers. And then in the third period, the crowd starts breaking out into Brady's better chant, which is great. You know, actually, the crowd went into a Brady's better chant several times through the game. And my reports say that the chant was started by Gary Bettman. That's okay. Well, I mean, that's very forward of him, but it's appreciated, Gary. Really appreciate that. Now retire, please. And then Timmy Stützle with a goal to restore the 2-goal lead on a late power play in the third period. So this is really important because I wouldn't go so far as to say this is historical, but in a sense, it kind of is, just because we're looking at over a decade since this happened. So for those who didn't watch an episode, actually, no, it was just last episode. Uh, my co-host Mod and I did a kind of a special version of Game Over where it was almost entirely Sens trivia, and the name of the game was name the goal scoring leader for the Sens for every season that they have existed, and also try and guess how many goals they scored. So, as far as the leading goal scorer on the team goes for the past 30 years, it's all very fresh in my brain. So, I know that now with Timmy scoring his 36th goal, um, that's the highest number of goals an Ottawa Senator has scored since Danny Heatley, if you can believe that. We had Josh Norris scored 35 last season. And for those keeping track, oh my God, for those keeping track, a decade earlier was the last time that anyone on the team scored 35 as well. So Milan McCulloch scored 35 in 11-12. And then a decade later, Norris scored 35 in 21-22. So going back further than that, the last time a player scored 36 or scored over 35 goals was, other than Tim Stützle this year, obviously, was Danny Heatley in 08-09, who ended the season with 39. Can Timmy be the first player on the Sens to score 40 since Heatley in 07-08? Who I believe Heatley scored 41 in 07-08. So it's within reach. I unfortunately don't know the Sens record off the top of my head. I can do math. 60, 74 games played. So 8 games left. Can Timmy score 5 or more? So Timmy needs 4 to hit 40, and he needs 6 in the remaining 8 games to score the most goals since Heatley went 50 back to back. I think he can do it. He's on such a tear. And there's been a lot of focus on how tough the Sens schedule is leading up towards the end of the season here, which what are we working with here? So following this game, Philly, Toronto, Columbus, Carolina, Florida, Tampa, Carolina, Buffalo. A lot of tough teams. I think you should just put up 6 against Columbus. That's what I'm thinking. So all that to say, Timmy, highest number of goals scored for the Ottawa Senators in a season since Danny Heatley, and there's still 8 games to go. So let's see what happens. I don't know if I'd say that Timmy is destined for a 50-goal season in his career. I definitely think he's destined for several, fingers crossed, 40-plus goals, 100-point seasons. Listen, he's too good at too young of an age for this to be like fluke is a strong word. And there's no way this is a fluke. I don't even want to use the word fluke. I've said it 6 times now. It's losing all meaning. He's too good at too young of an age and has been too good since 2023 began for this to be anything but a glimpse into his future and the joy that Ottawa Senators fans and frankly hockey fans in general are going to be able to experience watching him over the next, hopefully, 15 plus years. He's something else. We'll circle back to Stützle in a bit here, but just to top it all off for the game, Pinto with an empty netter, and then I think that's all the goals. Okay, no, actually, it looks like Florida scored a couple goals in this game as well, but that's okay. We can skip those. So, big 5-2 win for the Sens in this one. I think so earlier in the show, I said I'm going to get negative a little bit. That's about as negative as I'm going to get here, folks. I think we're at the point of the season where, playoffs are not going to happen. So I think we just got to enjoy the games we have left here to watch as Sens fans, and just try and, you know, hold on to the positives and just enjoy them, because, as frustrating as the season has been at times, it's been really great at a lot of points, but it has been extremely frustrating quite a few times. And the off season is long. It's a long, long off season. We have baseball to get through it, which is great, but it is a long, long off season. So just enjoy these remaining 8 games, and I'm gonna do my best. I'm doing a bunch of these last few games here, so I'm gonna do my best to try and pull away, maybe not nothing but positives, but do my absolute best just to try and enjoy every single game, because as much as I love baseball, I'm going to be missing hockey a lot within 2 weeks of playoffs ending. So I'm going to take a quick peek at the chat here and see how our wonderful viewers are doing right now. Are you disappointed with how the season has gone? Because personally, I think this is where we should have been this season, fighting for playoffs, but not quite here. I think next year is our year. Losing Norris also really hurt us. 100. I agree entirely. Actually, on for my interview for when I was interviewed for this position before the season began. Unfortunately, Steve couldn't make it, but I was in a Zoom call with Andrew, Adam, and Jesse, and I believe it was Jesse who asked me, where do I think the Sens will finish this season? And I'm a little off. I mean, things can move around towards the end of the season here in the last few games. I guess depending on how many Eastern teams are playing each other. But my answer at the time was, I think they're going to be the best team in the East who missed the playoffs. And, it's looking like I'm probably going to be a couple spots off from that. But, not a huge deal. Is it a bummer? Because I think the way that the season ended up for the Sens, there were blocks of just awful hockey and sections of looking so good and so very much like a playoff team. I think that adds to the disappointment of it all, of not making the playoffs. When you're a team that starts the season 6-12-1, and then over the next, I don't know, I can do math, over the next 35, maybe even 40 games, you're playing at like 100-point pace. But you just dug a hole that's way, way too deep to start out the season to ever catch up. And then when it looks like you might actually do it, you might actually catch up, then you go on that stinker of a Western road trip they just had, where they lost to Calgary and Vancouver and Chicago. And so I think part of the disappointment for me anyway, I don't know how other Sens fans are looking at the season, but I think the fact that the team looked awful and then looked great and then looked awful again for a stretch, I think the separation of those two kind of sections where the team looked terrible helped us focus on that longer section in the middle where the team looked great. And I think because we were able to focus on that, long 40-ish game stretch where the team looked like a playoff team, that sort of became the expectation, if that makes any sense. I do think that I do think that, if the season had been a little more consistently rather than terrible, good, terrible, we might just as a fan base be a little bit happier. I don't know. We'll see how that all goes. But yeah, I completely agree with you that losing Norris really hurt the team, and that next year is the year. A few question marks to be answered still, with DeBrincat, Brandstrom and Pinto, also RFAs. Does Hamnick come back? If Hamnick doesn't come back, that $3 million off the books is really going to help fill out some of those RFA contracts that have to be signed. Because it doesn't look like the cap's going to be going up a whole lot this offseason. So the money for DeBrincat and the rest of those guys are going to have to come from expiring deals and a little bit of cap space that's left on the team. From Jack in the chat here, fun fact: last time Sens beat Panthers on home ice, since March 29th, 2018, penalty shot, OT winner from Pajot. A penalty shot in OT. You'd think I'd remember that. I have zero recollection of that. 2018, 17-18, which, you know what? Now that I think about it, that makes sense. Towards the end of the 17-18 season, I was probably just repressing everything I'd seen that season. That's rough. And Pajot. I have not been looking nearly as closely as I should to a bunch of teams in the last few weeks. So I'm wondering how Pajot is doing. I should take a peek at how he's been doing this season. I'm excited to see us next year with Norris back, Stützle with the full season in his current level, and the addition of Chychrun and Sanderson a step forward. I think we have a shot. Oh, for sure. I don't know if necessarily the Sens are instantly cup contenders next season, but absolutely should be in the playoffs. And honestly, I mean, the Atlantic is terrifying. Even with Florida falling off, still got to deal with Toronto, Tampa, Boston. So ideally, I'd love for the Sens to take a step to the point where they're not a wild card team next year. Tough to break into that top 3 in the division though. And yeah, like Tampa's looked kind of rough the last few weeks, and maybe that's a sign of them finally falling off. I don't know if I necessarily buy it. They'd have to be damn close to 500 about midway through the season next year for me to really think that they have fallen off for real. But we'll just have to see. But yeah, I think a full season of Chychrun. And the Sens do kind of have this 2-year window here with Chychrun's contract. Because as soon as Chychrun's contract expires, fingers crossed he plays to the point where he is needing a significant raise. So when you have a defenseman of Chychrun's caliber playing for, probably less than half of what he should be making, frankly, injury issues or not, I think you have to take advantage of that. And the other thing with that too is those 2 years of Chychrun's contract match up with Sanderson's ELC. So over the next 2 seasons, you get Chychrun for dirt cheap compared to what he should be paid, and you also have Sanderson on his ELC. So you need to take advantage of having 2 legit top 4 defensemen, maybe even 2. We'll see if Chychrun can stay healthy and if he can repeat what he's done this season, and also see if Sanderson takes that next step next season. You could have Chychrun and Sanderson both arguably legit top pairing defensemen for a combined 5.5 mil ish, around that mark, right? So I think with that 2-year block in mind, knowing that you have these 2 potentially 2 elite defensemen making a combined 5.5 mil, you need to take advantage of that while you can, because as soon as those contracts end, they're both guys that could be asking by the time. And also, fingers crossed that the cap goes up by this point, by the way. But 2 years following that, when both their contracts are up and you have to re-sign them, and I believe Chychrun's going to be a UFA, and at least Sanderson will be an RFA. And I don't know, depending on how Sanderson goes, will he want that long 8-year extension? Is he going to want a bridge? Either way, you could be looking at that pairing going from 5.5 to the asking being closer to somewhere between 15 and 20 million for the 2 of them. So I think you really need to take advantage of these next 2 years. Really cross your fingers for a healthy Norris. And there's a long list of I love the Sens core, and there's a long list of things that I do think need to go right for them to be real contenders next season, and that's not even addressing fixing the depth. So most of the core has been phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. I would love a full season of Shabbat looking like he has the last few games. Shabbat has not played up to par, at least what he should be playing at. This season was supposed to be his coming out party, right? Like this season was supposed to be the season that he puts up insane numbers, and it's really been Sanderson's season more than anything. But if Shabbat can play to his full potential, give us 80% of Shabbat's full potential, him with a healthy performing Chikrin, Sanderson. Zub has taken a step back this season, which is a shame. But the defense as a whole kind of has more or less. So I do think that if Zub and Shabbat can both kind of go back to if they can both play as well as we've seen them play for extended periods of time, the Sens top four on D is insane. And the way that Brandstrom's playing right now, I am fully on board with him being a 5-6 next season. No complaints there from me. I'm a little on the fence about re-upping Hamonic next year. I know he's been getting a lot of love on Twitter and from a lot of Sens fans in general. Not fully convinced. I know he's looked great, the last 20 or so games, but there are 80 games in the season, so important to keep that in mind. I want to see what they have with Clevin. I want to see JBD and Lassie Thompson get extended looks if possible. Though at the same time, I am, my main concern with the defense now is who's going to be their sixth guy. That feels a lot better than it did at the beginning of the season. And then as far as the forward core goes, Batherson needs to play a whole season the way he's played the last 7, 8 games. He's looked unbelievable in the last couple weeks. So if he can put together, most of a season looking like that, I think he must have been injured for most of the season, because for stretches there he looked rough. So the fact that we're seeing now, like, okay, so he can look as good as he did last season, that is really reassuring. So I think if you keep the top 6 as is with the healthy Norris, of course, and then you have a third line of Pinto, Joseph, and I don't mind throwing Greg, throw Greg on the wing, see how that works. If not, bring in a scoring third line winger, maybe then have a fourth line of, I would love to see them bring Brassard back, honestly. If you want to keep Greg at center, a fourth line of Brassard, Greg, and I guess, I don't know, Kastelic, or if you're holding on to Brown, I'm fine with that. I'm talking about the potential lineup for next year a lot. You know what? Let's just cap it off with goalies then. Don't think Talbot's coming back. I am perfectly happy with Forsberg being a 1B maybe. As good as Forsberg has been on different stretches, I don't know if I want to rely on him for 60 plus starts. Forsberg, to me, I would love to see a scenario where two goalies are on the Sens are playing 40-ish each. And I don't know if that other goalie is going to be Sogard. He's looked brilliant at times. But I think goaltending, as long as the Sens are able to put together some decent depth options up front and on defense, goaltending is the biggest question mark. So specifically, anyone watching right now, if you have any ideas for goaltending or any opinions on goaltending at all, feel free to throw that in the chat, because I think as far as the top 6 forwards and top 4 D go, it's pretty much set in stone for next season. Let's see here. I hope ownership fires DJ after the season. He's too inconsistent, and our defensive system is so bad. We also need to stop dumping the puck. Players in the future are going to be really fast. So at the top of the show, I kind of mentioned how, because it sounds like ownership is going to be taking over in the middle of the offseason, I don't know how likely it is that they're going to clean house. Do you want to be holding interviews for and that's the thing. I think if ownership comes in and they replace the coaching staff, it wouldn't surprise me at all if they replace management. Like I said at the beginning of the show, if you're coming in as a number one, new ownership, you're coming in as a business first person, right? So if you come in and you're like, well, this team has missed the playoffs since 2017, and they've had the same GM since I can't remember when Pierre took over, 2015. Listen, as good as he's been the last 12 or so months, like dude's getting canned. So I don't know if he's getting canned if that's the mindset of the new ownership coming in. But the other side of that is that because ownership's coming in, according to Gary Bettman today, middle of the summer, um, like what ownership group is going to want to be doing coach and management interviews and the hiring process in like August? Like, I mean, maybe that's what's going to happen. Um, I don't know because I feel like if you're trying to bring in a new coaching staff and a new management, if you're a new owner coming in and you want to just tear it all down and start from scratch as far as your employees go, doing that like a month before camp starts just doesn't feel like a smart move. So um, we'll just have to see how it goes. Well, I'll have to see how that unfolds this summer. Um, yeah, keep Broussard, sign a third liner, and we need a solid goalie. Um, yeah. So I can't even say your name in the chat because it's just a whole bunch of letters. But we're gonna call you D. D agrees with me on each of those points. I think you keep Broussard as a fourth liner. Yeah, sign a third line winger. Ideally, probably someone to play with Pinto and Joseph. If you can sign a third line winger with fucking wheels, like someone who can really move and keep up with Joseph, that could be a really fun line. Um, and then if you fill out the fourth line, like ideally you'd fill out the fourth line with guys who can kill off a penalty. Because I am tired of seeing Austin Watson on the PK. I'm gonna be real with all of you. Um, Brady's better from Living in the Mist. Correct. Um, let's see here. But I feel like we are going to have the same problem heading into next year, though. Not sure what you're specifically talking about there. Could be due to the slight delay in the chat versus the stream. So if you can just fill out that point a little bit further, we'll talk about that for sure. But yeah, it's an exciting and scary time. You know, because like I said, new ownership coming in, and as fun as this season's been fun. It's been a fun season. It's been a huge step. The Sens have a good chunk more points than they did at the end of last season with 8 games to go. I want to say 4 more points now already with 8 games to go. So it's been a fun season. Like you can't argue with the fact that it's been a fun season. It's been a huge breakout year for a bunch of guys on the team. But I can't be fully relaxed and enjoying it because of the whole ownership thing. And while that's also exciting, I started watching Welcome to Wrexham and just really hoping for if it's the group with Ryan Reynolds, a TV show like that for the Sens would be so much fun to watch. Not only as a Sens fan, but like wouldn't that I know I've talked about this probably several times on the show before. So if you're a regular listener, you're probably tired of me talking about this. But how huge for the sport would a show like that be? Like it'd be huge. And I know a lot of Leafs fans are going to say, well, there was the Amazon series, but like, so cards on the table, I didn't watch it, but a friend of mine who, yes, is a Sens fan, but I know like objectively, like he will speak about this objectively. If it was a good show, he'd tell me, and he told me it was lacking. So, and I'm not saying that's good because it's Ottawa. Like, fuck off, whatever. Ottawa's a small market. Hockey's never going to get big because of Ottawa, but hockey can get big because of a monster TV show that will be big because the last sports show that Ryan Reynolds made about the biggest sport in the world is big, if that makes sense. I still think that the NHL and Gary Bettman probably should want the group with Ryan Reynolds to get the team. But who knows? We'll see what happens. I do think that I mean, look what this is embarrassing. I'm forgetting the name of the show, the F1 show on Netflix. Like look what it's done for F1. I mean F1 granted was huge already, but just what it could do for the sport. A good show could do for the sport. Ownership not just huge. Ownership specifically gonna have the same problem heading into next year with ownership. I see. Okay. In Ottawa, yes. So not just huge for the sport, but Ottawa would get more exposure. Ottawa absolutely would get more exposure, and I mean Ottawa is as a fan base, we're doomed to be the team in between Montreal and Toronto. In a purely geographical sense, Ottawa's never going to be a huge market. It can't be. Like the Ottawa Senators are a team that doesn't have the hockey fan in Ottawa demographic locked up, Like Ottawa's never going to be a huge market just because the team is stuck between Montreal and Toronto. And while I think, if in this hypothetical universe where Ryan Reynolds is part of an ownership group that gets the team and then gets to make a show and it's on Disney Plus and he gets a whole bunch of viewers, like that's going to help the number of fans for Ottawa for sure, because they're going to be like, oh, that's the Ryan Reynolds team. More importantly, I think that like just having a fan base watching that show to grow the sport is so like it feels like a no-brainer that it's the best possible outcome. And cards on the table, I haven't done nearly enough research into the different confirmed groups interested in the team. I know there's a lot of them. Apparently The Rock is part of one, sure, which would be very funny after he showed up at a Leafs game. But I gotta wrap up this conversation because it feels like we're talking about it a lot. And I'm sure Maud and I are going to be talking about this a lot on the last show of the season, which naturally, if you couldn't guess, the last show of the season being the last game of the season against Buffalo on the 13th of April. It's going to be a long one. It's going to be just a general season recap. So that'll be a really long one. I'm sure we're going to talk about this a lot more at that point. So I think at this point, I'm going to do my best to wrap up the potential ownership talks, because it feels like I've talked about this several times, and as much as I want to talk about it, I'm just repeating myself. So, from Daniel in the chat, remember when people were criticizing the Stützle contract? Looks pretty great now. Yeah, and I mean, a lot of people were criticizing it, but they were criticizing it from the perspective of like, I feel like a lot of them were looking at like, this will probably work out, but that's a lot to bet. So I'm gonna out myself here. I am someone who I've always loved that contract. I've loved the Stützle contract, but I am someone who is, injury issues aside, I'm someone who's a little bit iffy on Norris making about the same. Now, if Norris is overpaid by $1 million or $2 million, is that the end of the world? No, because Stützle is going to be underpaid by like $4 million, so it evens out somewhere in there. But listen, when Norris signed an 8x8 because he was supposed to be the number one center on the team, that made sense. That's like bottom line number one center money is $8 million a year. Bottom line. So when you can lock up someone that you're confident can be your 1C for 8 years, and the dude is in his early to mid 20s, I think you have to do that contract. Like just the upside is too good. The potential upside on that is too good. But I think I don't want to say that Norris was unproven when he signed that contract, because he spent the better part of a season scoring at a 50 goal pace. And granted, that is, he get an 8x8 contract because he played really well in like 60-ish games? Yeah. So there's also another way to look at that of being like that, with being like, that's, not great. But who knows? That contract could be phenomenal. I think also part of it is the fact that Norris hasn't played like all season. And I think part of the problem is I'm forgetting just how good he looked last year. So if he can come back in and be lights out like he was, and I'm not saying he's got to put up 50 goals every single season, but if Norris can come in and play like, I'm not going to say a 1C because Stützle is obviously the 1C of the future. But if Norris can come in, play second line center, and like just and just put up like, I'd be thrilled with like like if the usual Norris season is like 30 goals and 35 to 40 assists, like I'm thrilled with that. 8x8, that's fine. Like the Sens have enough bargains elsewhere that's fine. But that 8x8 does have me a little bit nervous. Whereas the Stützle 8x8 now, even at the time of signing, I was like, he's going to grow into that contract. That contract hasn't started yet, and he should be making 11 million per year, maybe 12. So, all that to say, he needs to fire his agent. Yeah, I mean, he's probably kind of bummed that he could be making 3 to 4 mil more, 3 to 4 mil more per year heading into next season. But he did say that when he signed that contract, that the first thing is the most important thing is that his parents can retire and they don't have to work, which is a great move by him. So yeah. Hey, remember earlier in the show when I said I'm just gonna pull the positives out for the rest of the season and not get too negative, and then I just spent a few minutes being really worried about the Josh Norris contract unprompted. I'm still working on the purely positive thing, I guess. So my bad, folks. My bad. um, but yeah, I think with that we're gonna call it a show. I think my immune system kicked into overdrive here because we've been live for about 40 minutes and I haven't sneezed, and I don't think I've gone through any point today without sneezing in over 15 minutes. So um shout out to my body knowing that I need to do a show and not making me sneeze or do any gross cold time bodily functions on stream. So Mr. Negativity person Charlie, that's me. That's me. Everything is terrible, and the Sens are never going to be good. So with that in mind, let's take a quick look forward for the next game. And the next game is going to be on Thursday. So the Sens have a few days off here. Next game is going to be Thursday, March 30th, and both Mod and I will be on that show. It's against Philly. Like, that should be a win. And am I fine with no playoffs this year? Yeah, at this point, like, I'm fine with it. So at this point, I just want the Sens to win to make that first round pick to Arizona as not good as possible. Or maybe I want it to be really good and win the lottery, and then the Sens can keep it. I'm torn now. I'm really, really torn. Anyway, we'll see. But yeah, that Philly game should be super winnable. I can't even enjoy watching that Philly game because I love Travis Konechny, and dude has been injured for a good chunk of the season. So, hopefully it'll be a fun game. Because I think other than that, so like they got Philly, then they got Columbus later on, and other than that, it's mostly killers. So, or at least playoff, if not playoff adjacent teams. So, let's hope for a fun win on Thursday because there might not be too many left this season. We'll just have to see. Maybe some teams are going to be sitting their best players leading into the playoffs, and the Sens are going to run away with it. And then get to pull a mid to late 2000s Leafs and miss the playoffs by like 2 points. So that would be painful. Anyway, with that, I'm gonna stop the show here, folks, because I'm gonna be able to find a way to ramble on for the next 10 minutes and say a whole lot of words while simultaneously saying nothing. So thank you so much for tuning in to Game Over. And if you enjoyed it, click the like button. Helps out the algorithm and all that. Speaking of algorithms, subscribe to STPN on YouTube. It's free. Subscribe. Do it. If you're listening to this on Spotify or Apple Music or wherever you enjoy listening to podcasts in a purely audio form, you specifically, thank you for listening. But also head to YouTube and click subscribe and like and all that fun stuff, because it helps the show out a whole bunch. And we would love for this to last a good long time. And we want to grow the show because the show's better with more of you watching, more interaction in the chat. Just makes for a more fun, interactive experience for not just, you guys watching and listening, but for myself and Mod, because sometimes it's hard to fill 40 minutes by yourself. So all that to say, we'll see you on Thursday. Thanks for watching.
Game over! Powered by Sports Interaction, Canada Sportsbook.